Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, let's return now to our top story, that of Brexit talks. David Davis has been addressing business leaders in Washington, telling them he's a determined optimist. It comes after EU negotiator Michel Barnier refused to move on to stage 2 of talks in Brussels, saying not enough has been done on the divorce bill. Well, I'm joined now by Remainer Gina Miller and the director for Eurosceptic think tank Bruges Group, Robert Ould. Many thanks indeed to you both for joining us this afternoon. So, Robert, if I could firstly start with you. There's been a third round of talks, a lot of toing and throwing. Michel Barnier accusing Britain of being unrealistic and nostalgic when it comes to Brexit negotiation. It's been a pretty bad week in terms of negotiations, or has it?
Well, there's always a lot of bluster that comes from the European Union when there's negotiations on anything, either a treaty change or, of course, a bailout for one of their struggling economies. They always play a lot of theatre. Will there or won't there be an agreement? There'll be criticisms saying the sides are too far apart. In the end, they always come together and make some kind of a deal. Really, the truth of the matter is that things are being negotiated behind the scenes by the civil servants. And this isn't the first time that the European Union has done a trade agreement with another country. Other countries outside the European Union, they've allowed them to have easier access through customs than other nations. They've done this before. All they have to do is replicate previous agreements that the European Union has made with other countries, and then we can go forward. And actually, they need us, and they know they need us. The EU lurches from crisis to crisis. Britain has low unemployment, the lowest unemployment since the mid-1970s. The EU has very high unemployment. They need access to Britain's markets. Desperately needed. There'll be an agreement. We've got 18 months to make that agreement. And Michel Barnier, at the beginning of this process, said that an agreement would just take 18 months to agree. There will be an agreement. We can be quite sure of that.
So, Gina Miller, what we've seen over the last few days is a lot of hot air from both sides, a lot of posturing. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there is going to be an agreement because Europe needs Britain more than Britain needs Europe.
I find it extraordinary that we don't still accept that there are 27 on one side of the table and us on the other. But I'd like to move past a lot of this blustering because I think we have to be realistic. We do not have 18 months. If we do not make progress, and this week has shown us that we haven't made substantial progress on the 3 areas that need to be discussed in phase 1, we can't start phase 2. This whole idea that we were putting pressure on the EU to change its rules. We agreed the rules at the beginning of this process. We agreed that we would sort out the people, the EU citizens, Irish question and our divorce bill before we went to phase 2. So to try and change the rules when the clock has already started ticking seems to be a waste of time. And I think the most realistic thing going forwards is to say, yes, we must reach an agreement because that would be... excuse me. You had your say. I'll have my say now. It is not 18 months. If we get to the end of the year, it's really, really 10 months to undo over 40 years of membership. And if you think it's just about a trade deal, it is about so much more. It is about agencies. It's about citizens' rights. It is, as I say, about undoing over 40 years of membership.
Roberts, is that a fair point? We've made an agreement on stage 1. That was the initial arrangement. We can't move on to stage 2 unless we've dealt with stage 1. And at the moment, it does seem that the divorce bill does seem to be the sticking point.
Well, Gina's wrong on so many points. Of course, we're not negotiating with 27 other countries, and the final deal is voted on by qualified majority voting. And Gina's just said that we need to get on and pay this deal. That's what she effectively was saying. We need to pay the European Union the money they're demanding now. Who is Gina looking after? Whose interest is she looking after? Is it the British taxpayer or the European Union? The European Union wants us to pay to move the agencies out of the UK. We're not paying for that. Why would we? We pay for the staff pensions of the European Union employees. The European Union should pay for that. In Article 50, there is no stage process where it's one stage following another, Britain paying money, and then we talk about the trade. That doesn't exist, and Britain can
Robert,
leave
do you think that we should be paying anything
without paying anything?
Do you think that we should
They know that. They cannot push us too far.
So Robert, do you think that we should be paying any sum at all?
Well, the European Union owes us money. There's assets that the European Union has in the European Investment Bank, in the European Central Bank, the European Union's buildings, where they house their 50,000 staff. Britain has a share of them, surely. We've put money into the European stability, European bailout mechanisms. This money should be returned to the British taxpayer. We've been bailing out their economies. We paid tens of billions bailing out the failures of the Eurozone, and we've given them enough already, I think. We need to look after the British taxpayer. And David Davis is quite right, and Liam Fox in Japan. Doesn't that tell you something? Britain is outward looking. We're a global trading nation. We're trying to make agreements with other countries around the world. We're looking at the bigger picture than just the European Union. And Gina, shouldn't be so pessimistic. Let's be optimistic about the success that Britain can have outside of the European Union. Let's focus on the positives and what we can achieve.
Okay, Gina, I just want to pick up on this issue of Liam Fox being in Japan, the Prime Minister being in Japan as well. Dr. Fox said earlier on that he believes that the EU is blackmailing the United Kingdom. Do comments like that help or hinder the negotiation process?
I think a lot of the name-calling and pernicious language that's being used is going to hinder that special deep relationship we're seeking with the EU after we leave. And when it comes, I'd like to just pick up on this point of the bill, in that we've made commitments. And I'm sure if you have ever come out of a telephone contract early, there's normally a payment you would make because you've made a commitment, you've signed a contract. We have already committed to over 40 projects that we will have to continue to fund. So it's not about funding the future, it's things that we have already committed to. And nobody wants to punish anybody else. This idea that the EU wants to punish us or we want to punish the EU doesn't help anyone. This is about ensuring we have an agreement so that both sides don't lose. And the idea of Liam Fox being in Japan talking about this, what's going to happen with the trade deal, listen to what the Japanese themselves have said, which is they are progressing the trade agreement with the EU before they talk to us.
Robert, it's still not clear as to when we can start discussing trade with our European partners. Can you give us a time at all whilst this hot air is being put out and all this toing and froing is carrying on, and this posturing that we've seen over the last week or so?
I wouldn't be surprised if there's discussions going on already, looking at various positions on easy access through customs, positions on tariffs, working with international agencies that are really responsible for trade, such as the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and the World Customs Union. I think a lot of things are already going on behind the scenes, and that's the way the European Union always works. The key things are always behind the scenes. That's one reason why Britain's leaving, because Britain has a great tradition of democracy, and we don't like how the European Union works, making deals away from the public. That's what I think is happening. So I think there will be an agreement. I'm quite positive there would be, because the European Union needs it. But also, the fact is that their whole system is set up to make these kind of deals. They make agreements with other countries, and as soon as Britain's outside of the European Union, we can make agreements with other countries around the world. That's why we don't want a deep and special close relationship with the European Union. Of course, we want to work with them like any other country. We want to trade, sell our goods and services and buy from them as well, of course. But we don't want to be tied into the European Union. And that's the point Gina doesn't understand. What she's trying to sell the British public isn't being taken by them. They actually do not support Gina. Who does Gina actually represent when, of course, most people now want the government to get on with leaving the European Union and, of course, do not want Britain tied into the single market nor the customs union? Overwhelmingly, that is the view of the British public, and the government, for once, is actually representing that view and bringing it into force.
Okay.
That's where we need to go. We need to come out of the European Union, respect the referendum, respect the democratic result. Clearly look at the opinion polls, Gina. It tells you a very different story to what you're offering.
Gina, final thought from you?
I like that everyone knows exactly what the British people talk about, and we keep going back to the same rhetoric. I'm far more interested in what's realistic and what's in the future. And for us, it is not just about trade. It's about all the other agencies. It's about security. It's about legislation. It's about making sure that we don't hurt our economy. Yes, it's about trade, but that's only one part of it. But the other thing I find extraordinary is this idea that we can do trade elsewhere, WTA, etc., when there's no detail. At this moment in time, what would be most helpful, I think, for the British people is to know that there are detailed plans and scenarios being discussed by the negotiation team rather than name-calling, so that we can make, hopefully, the best of the future after we leave the EU.
Robert, Gina, many thanks indeed for joining us. A debate that will go on for some time to come, I'm sure, to polar opposites. Many thanks indeed for joining us this afternoon.